Snow fell like ashes the morning the creek went quiet. Cade Mercer heard it before he saw it, the hush a river makes when someone builds a dam where none should be. He stood in the birch shadows, breath whitening, gloved hand resting on the neck of a dun mare that hated the smell of timber cut in winter. Cade listened, hat brim collecting frost, and a notion took root. The land was being murdered softly. He rode down slow. Maren Ashby's homestead sat where the basin opened its throat to winter wind. Her roofline wore ice like a crown. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin, disciplined. Cade had not planned to stop. He had planned to ride past, count fence posts, and keep his promise to himself. Don't look back. Don't look long. Don't want what isn't yours. He failed. She stepped onto the porch with a wool shawl and a rifle held without apology. Her eyes were river dark, the kind that made a man think of spring he'd never see. "You're late," she said. "I wasn't invited. You were warned." Her gaze cut toward the creek. A line of fresh posts stood where water used to run free. Planks crossed them like teeth. The structure bit the current and starved it, forcing trickles through, robbing Maren's troughs, her cattle, her chance to last the winter. Cade dismounted. "Who did it?" "Men in city coats," she said. "They had paper. They had Deputy Crooke." That name put a taste of iron on Cade's tongue. Silas Crooke wore the badge like a sermon and the noose like punctuation. He called it order. The town called it progress. Cade called it a price. Maren stepped closer. Snow squeaked beneath her boots. "You told me once the cold makes folks show their true shape." "I recall saying it." "Good," she said, "because winter's nearly spent, and shapes are showing." He could smell lamp oil in her hair, could hear the clock he'd fixed behind her walls still ticking in steady surrender. Those details did things to him. Want lit in his chest like a hearth left unwatched. "I'll ride to Pike," he said. "Make the sheriff look." "Pike's eyes are tired," Maren said. "And Crooke speaks for him when the railroad wine is poured." "Then I'll speak louder." Maren studied him. "Words won't change men who sold theirs." Cade looked past her, where a low ridge rolled toward town. Hoof marks pocked the white 4 horses, shod, heavy riders. He walked to the dam, knelt, and touched a seam where fresh tar bled into ice. He could feel the creek's pulse beneath, thready. A living thing choked. "You fix it, Mercer," Maren said behind him, voice low, "or I'll fix it and be nailed to my own fence." He turned. The wind made confessions of everything it touched. He leaned into it and spoke before judgment could. "By winter's end," he said, "you'll be mine." The words came out like a brand. He had not meant them the way they sounded, yet they landed between them and smoked. Ownership and promise wrestled in the steam of his breath. Maren didn't blink. "I'm no one's." "You're right," he said. "I misspoke. You meant it." He didn't answer. The creek cracked softly, a knuckle popping under the earth. From the cottonwoods, a raven heaved itself into the grey. 2 feathers stepped from behind the trunk as quiet as truth. Cade had not seen him, and that annoyed him in a way that felt like respect. "Tracks," 2 feathers said. 4 men. 1 drags his right boot. 1 coughs blood into the snow. "Anton Vale," Cade said, half to himself, "or one of his bought shadows." 2 feathers watched the dam. "This is not a good place to die." Maren's laugh held no sugar. "It's where they chose for my cattle." Cade stood, adjusted his gloves, and found the part of him that lived in winter instead of just surviving it. "We'll take it down. Tonight." Maren shook her head. "Crooke said any hand that touches this wood belongs to the county jail. Then we'll make it look like the river changed its mind." 2 feathers gave a small nod. "Ice speaks when you cut it right." They worked until their fingers burned. Cade drew an axe from his saddle roll, and 2 feathers drew a bone-handled chisel wrapped in sinew. They studied the current like thieves listened to a safe. They struck where seams would hide the truth, cut V-notches that the thaw would widen, loosened wedges that looked like accident. When the first plank sighed, Cade felt it in his ribs. Maren stood watch, rifle nested in the crook of her arm. "Riders," she murmured once, then again. On the second time her voice carried a new edge. "Badge." Cade didn't turn. He counted heartbeats. Wind. Snow. The creek, relearning its language. Then the jangle of bit rings, the soft, dirty laugh that belonged to Silas Crooke, and the smooth silence that rode with men like Anton Vale, money that didn't need to brag. "Afternoon, ma'am," Crooke called, voice honeyed and hollow. "Step away from the people's property." Maren did not move. Cade set the axe down, slow, and wiped his hands on his coat like a man finished with a chore. 2 feathers faded sideways, snow swallowing him to the knees. Crooke reined in at the fence line. His coat was clean, his smile cleaner. Beside him, a man in a black hat sat easy as a cat near sunlight. Anton Vale's eyes made measurements and offers at the same time. "Mr. Mercer," Vale said, "I buy debts. You seem like a man who carries a few." "Only the ones worth the weight," Cade said. Crooke's gaze slid to the notches. He saw what he wanted to see. "River's hard on new works," he said. "Lucky we were riding by." "Luck can sprain itself if it tries too hard," Cade said. Crooke's smile cooled. "Miss Ashby, the railroad secured rights. Your husband signed before his misfortune." The word hung there, bitter as old coffee. Maren's jaw set. Cade watched the way her hand did not tremble. He knew why. He had been the one to haul her husband out of a sluice after the early thaw and lay him straight with the lamp flickered low. He could still feel the weight. He could still hear Maren's breath when grief took her and bit down. Vale tilted his head. "By winter's end, this basin will belong to men who can feed it. You can stand with us or under us." Cade felt Maren's eyes on him, felt the vow he'd thrown like a lasso tighten around his own throat. He should have stayed quiet. He didn't. "She stands with me," he said. Crooke's hand played at his coat, as if calming something inside it. "That's so." "It is," Cade said, "and this dam will fail. Might be today, might be when the sun gets brave. But water remembers its bed the way men remember their sins." The wind shifted. The creek spoke. A plank shuddered, as if embarrassed to be seen in that company. For a beat, all 4 men watched it do a small, guilty dance. Vale's smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Sheriff Pike likes peace," he said softly. "I like investment, and I like men who keep their mouths small around it." Cade held his gaze. "Then you don't like me?" "Not yet." Snow thickened, turned the world to a white room where truths echoed longer than lies. Maren's rifle never lowered. 2 feathers was gone enough to be there if needed. Crooke drew a folded paper from his coat. "Last time, Miss Ashby. Sign the transfer. Keep your house. Keep the little fence. Let the men's matters be." Maren didn't reach for it. And then Sheriff Pike's voice rang from the ridge, tired and carrying. "Silas," he called, "that paper's got blood on the corner. Whose is it?" 4 heads turned as the sheriff rode into view, alone, hat brim heavy with snow. He looked like a man who'd slept beside a question too long. Crooke's smile fell away. Vale's hand settled on his saddle horn. Cade's axe lay in the snow. The creek held its breath. Sheriff Pike raised a gloved hand 2 fingers up, a sign to wait, and something black slid from beneath his coat, dangling on a leather thong, a badge that wasn't his. A U.S. Marshal's star. Sheriff Pike rode down from the ridge like a man carrying the last card in a crooked game. Snow swirled around him, but the weight he bore was older than winter. The U.S. card, Marshal's star, swung against his chest, catching what little light broke through the clouds. Deputy Silas Crooke's eyes narrowed, his hand slipping from the folded paper back toward the iron under his coat. "Marshal?" he asked, voice heavy with disbelief. "Since when do you wear that tin, Pike?" Harlan's jaw set. "Since the government sent me letters that Crooke saw fit to burn." He leaned forward in the saddle, voice carrying sharp as a hawk's cry. You've been selling rights that don't belong to you, Silas. And you, Vale, you've been buying with blood. Anton Vale didn't flinch. His smile stayed smooth, but his eyes darted like dice on a saloon table. Marshal or not, you can't stop the railroad. Men in Washington want steel through this basin, and they'll have it. You're just one tired sheriff trying on a borrowed badge. Cade Mercer stepped closer to Maren, snow crunching beneath his boots. He kept his voice low, meant only for her. If Pike's bluffing, we're about to see blood on this snow. Maren didn't blink. Her rifle stayed steady, dark eyes locked on Crooke. Then pray he's not bluffing. Two feathers appeared like smoke at Cade's shoulder, silent as always. His words were thin, measured. Crow flies low before a storm. Choose where to stand. Crooke let out a cold chuckle, the kind a man makes when he's close to drawing steel. Marshal or sheriff, it don't matter. Folks already signed. The law's behind me. Harlan Pike raised the star higher. The leather cord stretched in his hand. This law's behind me. Federal law. And it says fraud carries the gallows. The air froze. For a moment, no one moved. Even the horses seemed to listen. Cade's hand hovered near the axe lying in the snow, though his eyes stayed fixed on Vale. He knew the fixer's kind men who preferred others to spill blood for them. Vale broke the silence. Marshal, men like you fade. Men like me build. When the thaw comes, so do the rail ties. You can stand in front of them, but you'll be buried with the mud. A low groan rolled through the dam. The cuts Cade and Two Feathers had made began to widen under the pressure. A plank bent, water hissing through the seam like an angry serpent. Maren whispered, "It's breaking." Crooke snapped his gaze to the structure. "You touched it." But his words drowned in the sudden crack of timber. A section of the dam collapsed, water bursting free with a roar, tearing ice and plank apart. The horses reared, Vale's mount nearly throwing him. Snow turned to slush beneath the torrent, the creek reclaiming its voice with fury. Cade grabbed Maren's arm, pulling her back toward higher ground. Two Feathers already moved, guiding the dun mare up the slope. Sheriff Pike wheeled his horse aside, but Crooke fought with the reins, eyes wild. Vale clung to his saddle horn, soaked but upright. When the water settled, what remained of the dam sagged like a broken jaw. The creek ran free again, foaming and alive. Crooke's face twisted. He spat into the snow, hand finally wrapping around his revolver. "That's sabotage, and it'll hang every last one of you." Before the gun cleared leather, Pike's voice boomed. "Holster it, Silas, or I'll put you down as a traitor to the badge." Crooke's hand trembled. He looked from Vale to Pike, then to Cade standing firm beside Maren. The outlaw's eyes carried no fear, only the kind of promise that ends in dust or blood. Vale leaned over his saddle horn, dripping wet, but still smiling that thin smile. "Marshal, outlaw, widow, it makes no difference. You've tied yourselves together, and winter's not done with you yet." Snow fell harder, covering the tracks, covering the dam's ruin, covering the truth. But the vow Cade had spoken words meant as fire, not chains burned in the silence between them all. And somewhere deep in the basin, a whistle echoed faintly the sound of an approaching train. The whistle faded, leaving the basin wrapped in silence, but the sound clung to Cade Mercer like a nail in timber. A train meant men, more men with papers, guns, and the weight of a railroad that believed the West could be bought yard by yard. Sheriff Pike slid from his saddle, boots sinking deep into the snow. The U.S. Marshal's star glinted once, then vanished beneath his coat. He walked toward Crooke with the slow steadiness of a man who'd buried too many friends to fear another enemy. "Silas," Pike said, voice quiet, "you took my trust, burned my letters, and sold out your own people. I should end it right here." Crooke's face twitched. His revolver still hung at his side, half out, half in, like his heart wasn't sure where to fall. "You're old, Pike. Too old to carry that star, too tired to swing judgment." Pike's eyes narrowed. "Maybe. But I'll stand for the law until the ground takes me, and if you keep that gun in your hand another breath longer, the ground'll take you first." The silence cracked. Crooke holstered his weapon with a snap, his jaw clenched so tight the tendons stood like wires. Vale laughed softly, shaking water from his coat. "Fine theatre, gentlemen, but winter's not a court, and rivers don't sign deeds. Paper still rules, and I still hold it." He tapped the soaked document in his coat pocket. Maren's voice cut like glass. "Paper burns, land remembers." Vale's smile thinned. He swung his horse around, water dripping from its flanks. "Then let memory keep you warm. I'll return when the thaw makes this place a road instead of a grave." With a sharp kick, he and his men rode back toward the ridge, leaving churned slush and echoes behind. Two Feathers watched them vanish into the white. "They will return," he said flatly. "And next time, not with words." Cade exhaled, steam rolling from his lips. He felt the weight of his vow, heavier than iron, heavier than the winter sky. He turned to Maren. "The creek's free for now, but Vale won't quit. Crooke won't quit. You'll need more than one rifle on that porch." Maren didn't answer. She just looked at him, eyes fierce, unyielding. He saw in them not gratitude but calculation, a widow measuring whether Cade Mercer was salvation or another ruin waiting to happen. Sheriff Pike adjusted the star at his chest, weariness dragging his shoulders. "I can't hold this alone. Crooke's men, Vale's money. It'll split the town in half before spring." He fixed his gaze on Cade. "You ride with me, Mercer. You stand with the law or you stand in its way." The question hung there, sharp as the wind. Cade had lived outside the badge all his life. To stand with Pike meant chains on his freedom, eyes on his every move. To walk away meant leaving Maren and the vow he'd spoken to be swallowed whole by the railroad's shadow. Cade's hand brushed the axe still lying in the snow. He closed his fingers, lifted it, and laid it across his shoulder. His voice was low, steady. "I don't stand with law. I stand with what's right." He looked at Maren, then at Pike. "And right now that means standing with you." Pike's tired eyes softened just a fraction. "Then saddle up. We'll need to move before Vale finds more friends." The storm thickened, snow drifting higher against Maren's porch, against the broken timbers in the creek. Cade helped her back inside, the warmth of her hearth wrapping him in a temptation he couldn't name. As the lamp flickered, he saw the ledger she kept hidden beneath the mantle, a book Vale would have killed for. A book of debts, names and secrets tied to the very railroad he claimed to serve. Maren caught his stare. "Some truths are heavier than bullets, Cade, and if you mean your vow, you'll carry them with me." The wind howled against the shutters. Cade tightened his grip on the axe. Outside, the snow buried tracks. Inside, secrets sharpened like knives. And from far off, beyond the ridges, another whistle screamed closer this time. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. The second whistle rolled across the valley, longer, deeper, like the throat of the earth calling warning. Cade Mercer stepped onto the porch, breath frosting, eyes searching the ridges. The sound carried too steady to be an echo. It was a real train, closer than any rails had a right to be this far west. Two Feathers joined him, silent until the last gust died. "Not tracks of steel," he murmured, "but men, Vale's men. They used the whistle to frighten cattle, to scatter folk." Cade nodded slowly. "Smoke without fire, but it still stings the eyes." Inside, Maren Ashby placed another log on the fire. She stood tall, but her hands betrayed her, shaking just enough for the lamp's glow to flicker in the glass. Sheriff Pike sat at her table, hat off, badge laid beside a half-empty tin cup. His face was a map of sleepless nights. "They'll come tonight," Pike said. "Vale doesn't waste daylight on threats. He'll ride under snow's cover. Crooke will be with him." Maren glanced at Cade. "And you'll be here when they do." Cade leaned against the doorframe, the axe still across his shoulder. "I gave my word." The fire popped. For a moment, that was the only sound. Then Maren spoke again, her voice low, like a confession to the dark. "Cade, the ledger." She crossed to the mantel, drew out the worn leather book, and laid it on the table. "My husband kept it. Names, bribes, debts. Every hand the railroad bought. Vale's name is inked in blood here." Pike frowned, fingers tracing the spine without opening it. "This is evidence, but it's also a target. Vale will burn this house down to keep that book from speaking." Two Feathers shook his head. "Burn house, burn book. Smoke still tells the story. Best to carry truth on feet, not shelves." Cade's eyes locked on the ledger. It was more dangerous than any gun. If Vale got it, Maren was finished. If Crooke saw it, Pike's badge would be useless. And if Cade carried it, his vow to Maren would grow heavier than winter itself. Outside, a faint rhythm broke the stillness, the distant crunch of hooves over snow. Cade lifted his head, every nerve sharpening. "Riders!" The room changed. Maren doused the lamp with a quick breath. Pike pushed himself up, every line of his body stiff with duty. Two Feathers melted into shadow, already reaching for the bow he kept wrapped in deer hide. Cade stepped out onto the porch again. Across the basin, torches bobbed in the night, orange beads against the storm. 6, 7, maybe more. Vale didn't ride light. Crooke's voice floated on the wind, carried with a preacher's weight. "By order of the county, this homestead is seized. Step aside, and no blood need stain the snow." Pike called back, his voice hoarse but steady. "By order of the United States Marshal, you and your men are trespassing. Leave now, or face judgment." The torches paused. Laughter answered, Vale's laughter smooth, cutting. "Marshal, sheriff, widow, outlaw. You can dress lies in any coat, but the cold strips them bare. Hand over the ledger, and you'll wake to see spring." Cade stepped to the porch rail, voice cutting through the storm. "Spring don't want you, Vale. This land's already chosen who it'll keep." The riders spread, circling. Snowflakes hissed against torchlight. Horses snorted, uneasy. Maren raised her rifle. Pike drew iron with a hand that trembled, though not from fear. Two Feathers crouched low, arrow-notched. Cade gripped the axe, feeling the weight of his vow and the storm together. He leaned forward into the night. Words meant only for himself, though the wind carried them farther. "By winter's end, I'll see you gone, Vale." The first shot cracked, echoing off the ridges. The porch shuddered with splinters. The siege of the Ashby homestead had begun. The first shot splintered wood from Maren's porch rail, shards stinging Cade Mercer's cheek. He didn't flinch. His axe swung up like a sentinel, and his eyes burned through the night at the torchlit riders. Sheriff Pike answered with his revolver. The muzzle flashed, echoing against the ridge. One torch dropped into the snow, its carrier cursing as his horse reared. "Hold steady!" Crooke's voice roared through the storm. "They're cornered." The riders surged forward, firing wild into the wind. Bullets thudded into the homestead's walls. Glass shattered, the lamp on Maren's table toppling in sparks. She stamped it out with her boot, then raised her rifle and fired into the night. A scream answered, muffled by snow. Two Feathers loosed an arrow, the shaft hissing through the gale. It struck true, one torch toppled, man and flame both disappearing into the drift. Silence swallowed him. Cade crouched low, dragging Maren down with him as another volley shredded the porch beams. "They'll burn us out if we don't move," he muttered. Maren's jaw was tight, her breath sharp. "This house is all I have." "Then we make it a fortress," Cade said. He kicked the axe free of the porch post and sprang down into the snow. Two Feathers joined him without a word. Together, they cut at fence rails, dragging them into a crude barricade. Bullets snapped past, snow exploding like powder around their boots. Sheriff Pike covered them, his revolver barking with a rhythm older than his hands. Each shot was measured, each one buying seconds. But the weight in his stance told Cade the old lawman's strength was failing fast. Crooke pressed closer, torch raised, his men at his flank. "Ledger for mercy," he shouted. "Bring me the book, and the widow keeps her skin." Maren's voice cracked through the storm. "Come and take it yourself, Silas." Crooke's laughter was a blade. "Gladly." Vale's voice cut in, smooth as silk, rising above the storm. "No blood if you yield. Widow, outlaw, marshal, your fight's already lost. The thaw is coming, and with it, my steel." Cade lifted the axe high, the firelight dancing along its edge. "Steel don't root in frozen ground," he called back, "and you'll find this land too cold to bury us easy." Then the night erupted. Torches hurled toward the roof, flames licking at the shingles. Horses charged the barricade, snow flying in white arcs. Crooke's pistol flared, his shot grazing Pike's arm and spinning him against the wall. Maren's scream carried through the storm, but Cade's vow drowned it out in his own chest. He leapt into the melee, axe swinging, snow turning red beneath the torchlight. The siege of the Ashby homestead had begun in earnest, and winter itself seemed to roar with it. Snow whirled in mad circles as the homestead burned at its edges. Cade Mercer swung his axe with grim precision, splitting a rider from his saddle. The man tumbled into the drift, torch extinguished in a hiss of steam. The mare beneath Cade screamed and bolted, but Cade planted his boots in the snow, shoulders braced like a wall. 2 feathers struck next, bowstring snapping sharp. His arrow buried itself in the shoulder of another attacker, spinning him half around before he dropped into the dark. The Lakota tracker moved like smoke there one moment, gone the next, his breath, the only proof he lived. On the porch, Maren reloaded with a fury that surprised even herself. Her hands shook, but her aim did not. Each shot cracked with purpose, keeping the torches from reaching the eaves. Sparks danced across the snow but could not root. Sheriff Pike, wounded, leaned against the wall with his revolver steady. Blood seeped through his sleeve, but his voice carried over the din. "Crooke, you cross the line tonight, and even hell won't take you in decent company." Deputy Silas Crooke rode closer, torch high, pistol leveled. His grin was madness in firelight. "Marshal Pike, your law is ashes. The railroad is the only gospel here." Cade lunged forward, shoving a fallen beam against the barricade as Crooke fired. The bullet shattered wood inches from Cade's skull. The outlaw roared, surging up and hurling his axe. It spun end over end, torchlight flashing along its steel, and struck Crooke's torch hand. The flame tumbled into the snow, smothered with a hiss. Crooke's scream split the night, his pistol firing wild as his horse reared. Vale's voice rose above the chaos, calm and cutting. "Enough games. Burn them out." 2 riders broke from the line, galloping hard with oil casks slung behind their saddles. Fire arrows hissed into the wind, trailing sparks. Maren shouted, "They'll torch the walls." Cade grabbed the nearest cask before it could break, wrenching it from its straps. Oil splashed across his coat, burning cold in the winter air. He shoved it into the snow and stomped it flat. The second cask smashed against the porch, flames climbing hungrily along the boards. Smoke thickened. The homestead moaned under the heat. Pike staggered forward, bloodied but fierce. "Inside, we can't hold the porch." Cade hauled Maren back, 2 feathers covering their retreat. Together they slammed the door as the fire licked higher outside. The room filled with the bitter stench of smoke and oil. Shadows danced on the walls. Maren clutched the ledger tight against her chest. "If they take this, everything's lost." Cade's eyes burned in the firelight. "Then they'll have to take you first, and I ain't letting that happen." Outside, Crooke's men whooped as flames chewed at the homestead's bones. Vale's voice cut through, calm as always. "Let the fire finish what bullets cannot. By dawn the widow's land will be ours." Inside, Cade gripped a wet blanket, beating at the flames as Pike slumped against the wall, pale from blood loss. Maren loaded her rifle again, smoke stinging her eyes. 2 feathers cracked a window, scanning for escape, but found only torchlight waiting in every shadow. The fire roared, the siege pressed in, and Cade felt his vow coil around his chest like a noose. By winter's end, you'll be mine. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. The fire clawed higher, smoke rolling across the rafters. Cade Mercer pressed the wet blanket hard against the flames, choking them one by one. Sparks hissed and died, but the heat seared his hands through the cloth. Maren coughed, pulling Pike back from the wall as his knees buckled. The old sheriff's face was pale, his wound seeping. "Leave me," Pike rasped. "I'll only slow you." "No," Cade growled, eyes flashing through the smoke. "You carried that star when no one else would. You're not dying here." Two feathers moved like shadow to Cade's side, nodding toward the back door. "Snow deeper that way. Tracks hide easy. If we go now, we vanish." Maren clutched the ledger, voice trembling but firm. "If we run, Vale takes the homestead. He takes everything." Cade turned to her, smoke trailing across his face. "Better a burned house than a buried widow." Her jaw tightened. "This is more than walls. My husband died for this land. If I leave it to Crooke, then he dies twice." A crash split the night, Crooke's men slamming a beam against the door. Wood splintered, snow whirled through the cracks. Vale's calm voice drifted inside. "One more strike, and your fortress falls. Choose the fire, or my mercy." Cade hefted his axe from the wet floor, shoulders squared. His mercy's poison. Two feathers slid an arrow onto the string. Poison can be swallowed, or spat back. Pike coughed, forcing himself upright, revolver shaking in his hand. "I'll hold the front. You take her out the back. Keep that ledger alive." Maren shook her head fiercely. "I won't abandon you." Cade's voice cut sharp. "Then don't, but if he falls, we move." His eyes locked with hers, fierce as the fire around them. "Your life's worth more than this timber. Don't argue it." The door shuddered again, the barricade splintering. A torch burst through, flames licking along the floorboards. Shadows of riders loomed outside, their laughter carried by the storm. Maren's hand found Cade's arm, steady, unyielding. "Then we fight here, not for the house, for what they think they can own." Cade stared at her, snow melting on her lashes, smoke staining her cheek, and he knew the vow he'd spoken had rooted too deep to pull free. He turned to the others. "Two feathers, watch the back. If they break through, we cut them off before they circle us." "Pike," but Pike's eyes were already burning through the smoke. "Say it plain, Mercer, tonight's a last stand." Cade raised the axe, listening to the storm pound the walls. "Then we make it one they'll remember." Outside, Crooke bellowed, "Tear it down." The door gave way in a thunder of wood and fire. Riders surged forward, torches high, steel gleaming. Cade charged into them, axe raised, his vow burning hotter than the flames around him. The Ashby homestead was no longer a house. It was a battlefield. Snow and ash fell together, a strange salt on the tongue. Cade Mercer moved through the chaos like a man born of it, axe swinging. Boots finding purchase on wet boards, slick with smoke. Riders fell back only to rise again, frantic, helped by hands that smelled of city oil and colder money. The homestead pitched with every shove, its bones protesting, but its people kept answering. Two feathers slipped through the smoke and out a broken side window, vanishing into the drift as if the night itself swallowed him. His return came with a soft scuffing of snow and the metallic whisper of a rifle in hand. He had not been gone long. He brought with him 3 townsfolk, shivering, wide-eyed, dragged from their cabins by the commotion. They crossed the threshold like ghosts, bringing with them the small, stubborn humanity of people who would not hand their lives away for a stamp on paper. Maren moved with a precision that belied the fear in her chest. She reloaded, panting, then reloaded again, each round finding a new target. When a rider lunged for the ledger tucked beneath the table, She met him with the flat of the butt and the fury of the woman who'd buried a husband and refused the ground's final claim. The ledger stayed against her like a vow. Pike's revolver barked a steady rhythm, each shot a metronome keeping pace with their survival. Blood smudged his sleeve, but his voice remained a steady drum. "Cover the back. Don't let them take the ledger." He spat the words into smoke and pain, and somehow the ache only sharpened his aim. Cade felt the world narrow to the temperature of his breath and the arc of his axe. He hooked a blade under a rider, sending him sideways into a drift. The man's cry was swallowed by the storm. Cade hauled him up, shoved him toward the broken gate where Crooke's men crowded, and for a moment the outlaw's hands were rough with something like mercy tossing men back into the snow instead of leaving them under it. Vale watched from the ridge like a conductor who preferred his orchestra brutal. He shouted orders that turned to curses, then to promises of later retribution. His black hat caught moonlight when it broke through cloud, a stark coin of shadow. "Take the book," he hissed. "Burn the house. Break the widow's spirit and the railroad will swallow the rest." A young rider slipped through a gap, sliding along the eaves with a torch, eyes wide with the thrill of being paid to be cruel. Cade met him at the doorstep, axe rasping through snow and air. The boy's horse bolted. Cade wrested the torch free and flung it into the drift, where snow hissed it into nothing. For a breath, the boy stared at Cade with the sudden knowledge that the men he rode with could be struck down by a single swing of a hand. Inside, the ledger felt hotter than the flames. Maren's fingers traced inked names as if reading a litany. There were names of men who thought themselves untouchable, names written in careful script with numbers beside them. There were lines that made her throat close, patterns of purchase and pressure that explained too much. Two Feathers pressed his lips together and pointed toward a set of tracks leading away from the homestead, small, irregular. Someone was leaving on purpose. He followed them through smoke and collapsed porch and came back with a handkerchief damp with tears and the white face of a child, wrapped and soot-streaked. The girl's mother clung to her, whispering thanks. The ledger, the fight, the threat it was connected to lives like this, small, ordinary, stubborn. Cade heard it then, the distant thump and groan of more men. Vale's reinforcements. A column of shapes moved over the ridge, slower but more resolute than the first. The train's phantom whistle heard earlier had been a promise. Now the promise rode in men with cold eyes. Pike read the ridge like a litany of trouble. "They'll come in numbers," he barked. "If they break through, scatter to Two Feathers Ridge and meet near the cottonwoods. Take the ledger and run. Don't—" His words cut off as Crooke's shadow filled the doorway, pistol in hand, and a grin split across his face like a fault line. He stepped through the smoke, boots carrying the smell of ledger and lawless coin. "You fought pretty," Crooke said, voice slick, "but men get tired. You've no more wood to keep this warmth." He swung the butt of his gun, clipping a beam. It groaned, then splintered. Cade swung hard enough to tear a cry from Crooke. The deputy staggered, the grin wavering, and for a heartbeat the old boast of the railroad met the old stubbornness of the frontier. But Vale's riders pressed at the edges, and the fire ate more of the roof. A section of the porch leaned, then tore away, plunging into the snow with a great groan that sounded like a house giving up a secret. Maren screamed, half from pain when a falling ember burned her cheek, half from the raw knowledge that if the house fell, so too might the ledger's safety. Cade grabbed her, pulled her to where Pike leaned, and together they shoved a trunk over the ledger, piling bodies and wood to hide it. The front line buckled. Riders streamed through where the porch used to be, boots sinking into slush. Crooke laughed and spat, and Vale's voice floated down like a promise of accounting. "We will take this valley, one deed at a time. We will make law from the ink of men who sleep." Two Feathers pushed through the crowd, bowstring singing. His arrow struck one of Vale's men in the neck. The man folded, hitting snow like a puppet with its strings cut. The sight sobered the attackers for a moment. Men are mortal. Men bleed. The realization passed like a cloud. Outside, the raid's momentum slowed beneath the basin's cold. Men hesitated at the edge of the homestead like fishermen at a cliff. They'd been paid to take land, not to face the stubbornness of those who knew the country bone deep. Cade wiped sweat and soot from his brow, the axe's handle slick under his hand. He looked at Maren's smoke in her hair, ledger wrapped in a trunk, eyes that had stopped pleading and started burning. He felt something fracture inside him, an old certainty that things meant what they said, the vow he had thrown into winter. By winter's end, "You'll be mine," sat like a stone and would not be set aside. From the ridge, a sound cut through the storm, not the drum of hooves, but a higher, keening note, a distant whistle, but closer still. Men around the ridge stiffened. Even Vale's smile thinned. The sound was not mechanical this time. It was a siren of a different sort, a cry that spelled more than reinforcements. In the doorway, Crooke paused, listening. His jaw worked. Cade looked to Pike. "What now?" he asked. Pike's eyes narrowed, the star at his chest a hard glint beneath smoke. "We hold," he said, voice low and certain. "We hold until help arrives or until the snow buries us all." From the ridge came a second cry, this one human, shaped like a bell, and answered by the distant echo of horses. The basin held its breath. The homestead's rafters groaned. The ledger pulsed beneath the trunk, a trapped heart beneath a battered chest. Outside, the men whispered, and somewhere beyond the ridge a new force gathered, slower but deliberate. The whistle's echo died, leaving only the crackle of flame and the labored breath of men who'd spilled too much blood in the snow. Cade Mercer stood in the breach of the broken doorway, axe dripping melt and shadow, eyes fixed on the ridge. The sound had not been trickery. It had been a summons. Crooke's grin faltered. His pistol hand wavered, as if even he could sense the valley shifting under his boots. Vale sat straighter on his horse, hat brim low, smile taut. "So," he murmured, voice carrying just enough to reach the homestead. "Someone else wants to join this dance." Two feathers drew alongside Cade, bow at rest but eyes sharp. Not Vale's men. Different hoof, heavier. The truth arrived like a storm cresting the ridge. Out of the snow rode a column of horsemen, not outlaws and not townsfolk either. Their coats bore federal marks, their carbines carried in practiced hands. At their head flew a banner no railroad could buy, the seal of the United States Marshal Service. Maren clutched the ledger tighter to her chest. "They answered Pike's letters," she whispered. "They finally came." Sheriff Pike sagged against the wall, face pale from blood loss, but a light sparked in his tired eyes. "Took their time," he rasped, "but by God, the law rides yet." Crooke swore under his breath, spinning to Vale. "You knew they were coming?" Vale's smile never wavered. "I counted on them being late." His gaze cut to Cade and Maren. "Seems I miscounted." The martial column descended fast, cutting through the snow with the certainty of men carrying warrants and unfinished wars. Shots cracked in the night, not wild, but precise. One of Vale's riders toppled from his saddle, torch rolling into the drift. Another turned tail before the order was even given. Crooke's voice rose in desperation. "Stand your ground. The basin belongs to us." But his men's resolve bled away with every marshal's volley. Horses screamed, boots pounded, and the fire of the homestead was answered by the thunder of law long delayed. Cade seized the moment. He dragged Maren toward the side window, two feathers covering them with arrow and silence. "Time to end this," Cade said, breath harsh. Maren's eyes burned through the smoke. "Not yet. If they don't see the ledger, Vale walks free." Cade met her gaze, then nodded once. He smashed the trunk aside, lifted the book, and raised it high where torchlight and moonlight could see. "This is what you've been bleeding us for," he roared. "Every debt, every bribe, every name, Vale bought in this valley." The marshal's captain spurred forward, his voice commanding. "Secure that ledger." By federal order, Vale and his men are under arrest. Vale's calm cracked. He yanked his revolver, eyes wild now. Kill the widow! Burn the book! Crooke charged forward, pistol aimed at Maren. Time slowed, the lawman's rifles rising, Cade's axe lifting, Maren's rifle already snug against her shoulder. The night exploded in gunfire. When the smoke cleared, Crooke lay twisted in the snow, his pistol arm shattered, the grin gone forever. Vale had vanished into the storm, leaving only hoofprints racing into the dark. The marshals surrounded the homestead, stamping out flames, pulling wounded men into custody. The siege was broken, but Cade knew the fight wasn't finished. He looked to the ridge, where Vale's trail cut into the white like a scar. The outlaw fixer still lived, and Cade's vow still burned. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. The basin lay scarred by smoke and hoofprints, the homestead cracked but still standing. Cade Mercer watched as the marshals hauled Crooke's men into a rough line, irons clinking against their wrists. Crooke himself sat slumped in the snow, his arm bound, his eyes filled with venom that refused to die. Sheriff Pike leaned against a fence post, bloodied but upright. The marshal captain approached him, saluting with a nod. "Marshal Pike, we came as soon as the snow let us. Washington sent us to find the man named Anton Vale. We were told he's buying this land with blood." Pike's tired eyes drifted toward the ridges. "You missed him by minutes, and he's not done." Maren stood close, the ledger pressed tight in her hands. "The proof is here," she said, voice steady despite the ash still smudged across her cheek. "Every name, every coin, every man Vale owns. With this, you can break him." The marshal captain extended his hand, but Cade stepped between them. His voice was low, rough. "That book doesn't just belong to the law. It belongs to her. Her husband died for it. She bled for it tonight. You'll get your chance at Vale, but this ledger doesn't leave her sight." The captain studied Cade, weighing the outlaw's fire against the widow's defiance. At last he nodded once. "Then keep it safe, but understand, without that book, Vale slips every rope." Maren's gaze flicked to Cade, gratitude and worry bound together in her eyes. He gave her a single nod. 2 feathers moved among the marshals without a word, gathering arrows, smoothing snow over blood, as if erasing signs from the earth. He paused only to murmur, "Tracks head west. Vale rides for the canyon." Pike pushed himself off the fence, swaying. "He'll regroup. He won't run far. Not with the railroad's gold in his saddle." Cade's jaw tightened. "Then we cut him off before he digs in." Maren caught his arm. "You promised me, Cade. By winter's end." Her words faltered, carrying the weight of his vow. He looked at her, smoke tangled in her hair, ledger still clutched against her heart. His chest ached with the truth of it. "By winter's end, Maren, you'll be mine. Not by chains, not by paper. By the life I keep you breathing." Outside, the marshals prepared their mounts, the storm easing just enough to reveal stars like cold silver nails. The captain called out, "Vale's trail won't stay open long. We ride now." Cade saddled his dun mare, hands sure, eyes fixed west. 2 feathers swung up beside him, silent but ready. Pike mounted last, stubborn fire holding him in the saddle despite his wound. Maren stood at the porch, snow at her feet, firelight behind her. She held the ledger high. "Bring it back with you, Cade," she said. "Or don't come back at all." Cade touched the brim of his hat, then turned his horse toward the canyon. The marshals fell in behind, torches bobbing in the storm like a second set of stars. The night swallowed them whole, leaving the widow alone with her house half burned, her vow bound tighter than ever to the outlaw riding west into the dark. The canyon loomed like a wound in the earth, its cliffs jagged and dark against the storm-heavy sky. Cade Mercer reined in his mare at the rim, breath ghosting into the cold. Below, torchlight flickered a camp hastily built, but with the order of a man used to commanding shadows. Anton Vale had dug in, Two feathers crouched beside Cade, eyes sweeping the ridgeline. 20 men, maybe more. Horses tired, but guns awake. Sheriff Pike rode up slow, his body stiff with pain but his voice steady. "We take Vale tonight, or we chase him until spring. And by spring he'll have bought half the territory." The marshal captain dismounted, signaling his men into cover. "We circle, strike from both sides. No fire, no noise, until I give word." Cade shook his head. "Vale isn't just another outlaw. He's a dealer. If he sees us coming, he'll burn every paper he carries and ride free. That ledger's only half the rope around his neck. The rest is down there." Pike grunted. "Then we need him alive." Cade's jaw set. "Alive or in the ground, so long as he's finished." The marshals spread, snow swallowing their shapes. Cade moved with two feathers along the ridge, descending by a goat trail slick with ice. Every step carried the echo of his vow, beating against his ribs like a second heart. From the camp, Vale's voice drifted upward, smooth as ever. "This land isn't theirs. It never was. By dawn, I'll ride east with deeds enough to drown Washington in ink, and not a marshal alive can stop me." Cade's hand tightened on the haft of his axe. He motioned to two feathers, then slid into the camp's shadows. A guard stepped forward, torch low. Cade's fist silenced him before he could cry out, the man slumping into snow. The campfire crackled, Vale seated at its heart, papers spread across a crate. His eyes caught the flame, and for the first time Cade saw cracks in that polished, calm lines of fatigue, shadows of fear. Yet his voice carried power still. "Men like Mercer fight for scraps. Men like Pike cling to dead stars. But me, I build an empire. Empires fall," Cade said, stepping into the firelight. Vale's head snapped up, smile curling like smoke. "Ah, the outlaw with a conscience. Or is it a collar now, riding beside marshals?" Cade leveled his axe, voice cold. "I ride beside what keeps her safe. That's enough." Guns rose all around. Marshals burst from the dark, rifles cracking, torches flaring. The canyon erupted in gunfire, shouts, and the clash of men desperate to own what the snow refused to keep. Cade drove forward, axe biting wood and steel, clearing a path toward Vale. Two feathers loosed arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark. Pike fired steady from the ridge, his voice hoarse but unbroken. Vale snatched his papers, shoving them into his coat. He fired once, twice, the shots wild, then bolted for his horse tethered at the canyon wall. Cade lunged after him, snow flying, heart pounding with the weight of his vow. "Vale!" he roared. The fixer swung into the saddle, eyes flashing. "You'll never keep her, Mercer. Winter ends for everyone." Cade leapt, dragging Vale down from the saddle. They crashed into the snow, papers scattering like startled birds, firelight painting the canyon in chaos. The outlaw and the fixer locked eyes, fists and fury in the frozen dark. The fight for the basin's soul had come down to this. The canyon floor was a storm of firelight, gun smoke, and snow. Cade Mercer grappled with Anton Vale in the drift, fists striking, boots grinding into ice. The ledger's scattered pages whipped through the wind like wounded doves. Around them, marshals and outlaws clashed, steel flashing, rifles cracking. Vale clawed for his revolver. Cade caught his wrist, slamming it against the frozen ground until the gun clattered loose. Vale's smile twisted into something feral. "You can't stop it, Mercer. Land bends to gold, not grit. She'll lose everything to me in the end." Cade's breath roared in his chest. "Not while I'm standing." His axe swung down not to kill but to bury its blade into the earth inches from Vale's skull. Snow leapt, sparks flew from stone, and the canyon froze on the edge of silence. The marshals seized the moment. Their captain barked an order, and Vale's men threw down weapons one by one. The fight drained out of them like blood from an open wound. Crooke's riders who had escaped the homestead now knelt in irons, curses muffled by snow. Two feathers appeared at Cade's side, bow still strung, eyes steady. He breathed still. Choice is yours. Vale spat blood, smirking even as marshals bound his hands. String me up, and another will take my place. Railroads don't die with one man. Sheriff Pike staggered into the firelight, pale but upright. The U.S. Marshal's star gleamed against his coat. No, but tonight, this valley remembers it has teeth. He turned to Cade. Your fight's done, son. Let the rope do the rest. Cade rose slowly, chest heaving, eyes never leaving Vale. For a moment, the vow in his heart begged for blood, for finality, but Maren's face cut through the fury, her voice, her fire, the life he swore to guard. He stepped back. The rope's yours. My vows to her. Vale was dragged away, still smiling through broken teeth, his empire of ink crumbling page by page. When the canyon quieted, Cade mounted his mare. Pike gave him a weary nod. You kept her safe. You kept the land breathing. That's more law than most men manage in a lifetime. By dawn, the homestead rose from smoke and ruin, scarred but standing. Maren waited at the porch, snowlight gilding her hair. The ledger pressed close. When Cade rode in, her eyes locked on his, fierce and unyielding. You brought it back, she whispered. Cade dismounted, laying the axe at her door like an offering. By winter's end I said you'd be mine. Not to own. To keep. To stand beside. Her hand brushed the burn scar on her cheek, then touched his. The ledger between them seemed smaller now, just paper, just ink. The vow between them was what held weight. Two feathers lingered at the edge of the yard, watching snow drift into silence. Pike sat his horse, badge-catching morning light, a man who'd seen one more dawn than he expected. The wind eased, carrying the smell of smoke away, leaving only the sharp, clean breath of winter nearly spent. Cade looked to the horizon, where the land stretched wide and open, and for the first time he felt it might truly belong to those who stood their ground. Maren's voice broke the quiet. Spring's coming, Cade. He tipped his hat, a rare smile cutting through his scars. And we're still standing. The basin held them both in its cold embrace, and the outlaw's vow lingered like a brand in the snow. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West.